Cities stand on the front lines of climate disruption, but they're also a lead solution to the global crisis. I heard yesterday that the fastest growing economies are in cities. Why? Because they open up efficiencies, they scale economies, respect to services, transportation networks, resource recovery, and much more. In this spirit this morning, we will discuss green growth and livability, share success stories and lessons learned of this green transitioning happening here in these cities, compare notes on ongoing challenges, and always an interesting point, and end with the importance of public-private collaborations with our guests. So please help me welcome Lord Mayor Frank Jensen from Copenhagen, Deputy Mayor Pekka Suri from Helsinki, and Mayor Gregor Robertson of my hometown, Vancouver. So Gregor, why don't you get us started with a few opening remarks?
Sure, thanks Marjorie, and thanks everyone for being here. It's been a great week and a great day to close now, and honored to have mayors from two fantastic green cities in Europe, and cities that we have been stealing ideas from for years here in Vancouver, as I think all of us have set very bold, very ambitious targets for our cities. In our case, we, I think along with Copenhagen, have set a goal to be the greenest city in the world by 2020 in our case. So we have a friendly competition as cities, and there are a number of different cities with this goal as their high-level objective. And we have measured our approach to green in terms of, it's like a decathlon, and setting about 10 major targets that we're shooting for across the board, from transportation to carbon emissions, to local food, clean air, clean water, doubling the number of green jobs in the city and growing our green economy. We have very clear metrics that we're driving at. We have regular reporting on this to our council and to the public. And it's a rigorous plan in terms of achieving an array of targets that we think, across, as you aggregate them, define what green is. But we get very specific now on the renewable energy piece. And this year, as we've made good progress over the past 5 years, striving to be the greenest city in the world and chasing Copenhagen, frankly, we have set another target that a number of cities are also setting that basically phases out fossil fuels as we know them today. And this is to be 100% renewable powered in Vancouver. And the end date for that is 2050. We hope we're able to do that a lot sooner. But obviously it hinges on technologies and services that are delivered by the private sector primarily. And we can create the frameworks, the regulation, the policy to drive that pace of change. But ultimately the partnerships with business and community are going to be essential to achieving the goal of eliminating fossil fuels from our diet and creating many job opportunities as we shift to renewables. Right now we're about 31% renewables. Almost all of our electricity is from renewable sources. And the big challenges for us are with transportation and with the heat in our buildings. And again, these are challenges that we're going to help solve with other cities. We work together in partnership on the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance is one where the leading cities focused on going from 80 to 100% renewable in the years to come are working together, exchanging ideas, best practices, figuring out who's working with who on the private sector side, what technologies are working best. So it's a great exchange and a great opportunity for us to set the pace as a leading group of cities and be able to open source that and share that with cities around the world. And that's really our overall goal. It's a friendly competition and it's open. We want to basically all cities to be able to improve quality of life, go green, and create enormous economic opportunities in the process. So it's a win-win that way, and we see Globe as yet another opportunity to cross-pollinate and to deepen the work that we're doing and the partnerships we have with the private sector as well. So I'll leave it there.
Mayor Jensen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind invitation to be here, especially to my colleague, Mayor Robertson, to be here in your fantastic city and your great leadership to make Vancouver the greenest city in the world we support you very much, and we will continue supporting you and following your steps forward to make Vancouver to a fantastic, livable city, and you have done a fantastic job until now. In Copenhagen, in my city, we are working on a very ambitious plan. We want to become being the first carbon neutral capital city in 2025. It's a very ambitious plan, but I'm glad to tell you that we are well on the way. We have reduced our carbon emissions with 50% since 1995 until last year. And we have a step-by-step plan to become the first carbon neutral capital city in 2025. We have, of course, done something special in Copenhagen to reach that goal. We have now 98% of all houses in the city linked to our very efficient district heating system. And that's why we have reduced our carbon emissions with 50%. We are working closely together with business and industry in the clean tech sector. We have a very strong collaboration with our clean tech cluster in Denmark called Clean. It's a platform for 170 companies in the sector in Denmark, so it's a very strong footprint from this industry in our country. We have a very long tradition to develop new green solutions in the business and industry, and in the capital city, my city, Copenhagen, we are working on a triple helix model where we, as a city, when we are going to invest in new urban development areas, we are working closely together with research fellows from Danish universities, but also from universities abroad, and with the business and industry to create new green solutions. And the business can use our city as a kind of green laboratory for testing new technology, making our city greener, but then can also use that reference from Copenhagen when they're going to meet with mayors and decision makers in other cities. And we very often introduce the solutions from Copenhagen to our colleagues in other cities. And just as Mayor Robertson said, that we are stealing each other ideas and concrete solutions. That's what it's all about when mayors are meeting. We are discussing what works and what doesn't when it comes to make the right investments in doing your city more livable and more green. And we are in the C40 family, Copenhagen. We are not one of the biggest cities in the world. We are like Vancouver, around 600,000 inhabitants, but in the greater Copenhagen area, we are 3.9 million people. So we have the critical mass to introduce new green solutions in our city. So thank you for giving us this possibility to introduce our concrete ideas from Copenhagen here today.
Thank you. Mayor Suri.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to show you a few pictures.
We like pictures.
Don't worry, I've cut down my usual 2-hour lecture down to 3 minutes.
2 minutes.
2.5. Yeah. The city of Helsinki has gone through a tremendous transformation in about 15 years. Most of us remember how climate change and sustainability as a whole started out as a threat, as a separate issue in city strategies. But we now enter the phase where sustainability is built in the strategies of most cities, and this obviously is where it should be. Sustainability is an economic opportunity. It's coupled with quality of life, and all these are now built together with varying success so far. But this is the big transformation we have aimed at in Helsinki. And one of the cornerstones is that we have to build a new relationship between the city government and the community. Otherwise, there's no way forward. If we only think of the city in terms of a service producer, we can never fulfill the expectations of the taxpayer. We have to have a community of residents, community of citizens, which is the city. And communication obviously is of first importance. Open data, participation, co-creation, and so on. One of our big things is fossil-free transportation. If we have a flagship, maybe it's that. And we're aiming at carbon-neutral public transportation in the Helsinki metropolitan region by 2020. We hope that that may be a Finnish export sometime in the future. We built a partnership with the industry, the city organization and the industry through a foundation, Smart and Clean Foundation, which we thought was perhaps the easiest and most viable way of providing a platform for public sector business cooperation. And we are trying out the new ideas, new innovations in the new parts of the city that we are busy building in our old port areas. We moved our old cargo ports from inner city locations to outside the city in 2008, which opened up great opportunities for development. District heating, like in Copenhagen, is a big tradition in Helsinki, and we try to use this fish harbor area, which you can see in the picture, as a test bed for new solutions. Sum up, sustainability, quality of life, and a thriving economy go together in cities. And it's a matter of harnessing the potential, the know-how of the citizens for the common good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to get the conversation going with the topic of green growth and livability, pretty complex issue. Yesterday in one of the workshops, the Green City workshop, we heard that the fastest growing areas of GDP is at the city level globally. So to get things started, I'd like you to share with us your perspectives on the low carbon infrastructure investments and how they A, increase health and wellness for residents, and B, how such investments lure and hold onto capital within your cities. Whoever would like to go first.
Well, maybe I'll jump in terms of where where we see the biggest bang for our buck. Right now, we were thrilled to have the Prime Minister and many members of his cabinet here this week talking about the importance of going green and dealing with our climate pollution. They are about to unleash their budget for the year ahead, and we have an ask at the table for transit investment. And right now, public transit investment across Metro Vancouver is the quickest way that we can reduce our emissions. In terms of infrastructure investment right now, it's a massive step, reducing the number of cars on the road. As the city grows, we're expecting 1 million more people here over the next 25, 30 years. And that means that well, we're not building any more roads. Basically, we've got the road network built throughout the region. The mountains and the ocean and the U.S. border basically block us from growing beyond our current footprint. So transit investments are the only way that we can prevent people from piling into cars and more emissions from that. So that's an investment that but then connects across Canada. There are two great bus manufacturers. New Flyer is a bus manufacturer that we want to build electric battery buses here in Manitoba, Canada. So it's Canadian jobs building buses to help people have clean transportation in Vancouver and cities across Canada. Just as an example of where government investment in infrastructure, working with private partners to deliver the technology and the service to citizens and ultimately dramatically reduce our carbon footprint in the process. That's at a big scale, and from that we go right down to neighborhood scale projects, which when they're added up, I think are dramatic reduction of our impact. In North America, between Canada and the US, we consume 4 to 5 times what is sustainable. Basically the one planet footprint, and that ecological footprint is a concept that came out of UBC here in Vancouver. We're at 4.5 planets of consumption right now in Vancouver, and part of our 10-year plan is to dramatically reduce that consumption. A lot of that happens at a neighborhood level through education, through programs, through people growing their own food in community gardens or their backyards. Those are the steps that individuals can take to reduce their impact, and the city focuses on enabling entrepreneurs, small business, creating solutions as well in the city to help people reduce their impact and go green in their lifestyle.
Thank you. Frank.
Going green is not only a possibility, it is a must, but we cannot continue conflicting the climate. We have, as mayors, we can see that we are already affected by the climate change. In my city, we have a cloudburst in 2011 in July. It costed more than $2 billion US dollars in damaging for the citizens and for the companies. So we have to react. When we were hosting in Denmark, in Copenhagen in 2009, the UN COP15 conference, a lot of heads of states and governments and leaders was afraid that going green and reducing CO2 emission was a choice between going green or welfare. But we can see in Copenhagen that that's not the situation, because we can see that we create a lot of new jobs in the green sector, in the clean tech sector, and there is a very good economy. And by our investments in the city, we can see that there's very good business cases behind our decisions for new concrete solutions in the city. It's the newest technology is more green, it's more sustainable, and it is cheaper for the citizens. When we have introduced district heating to 98% of all houses in Copenhagen, it's more cheap for the Copenhageners to heat up their apartments today than there was before. When my wife was moving to Copenhagen, living in a small flat, she was heating her flat with petroleum in a small oven. Today we don't have that kind of heating in the city. We have district heating all over the city. And that's much cheaper. So I think that's a very important message from the city leaders today to the heads of states and governments. That's going green. It's not only a possibility, it is a must, but it is also good for the economy and for job creation. And that was what Mayor Robertson and I was also saying when we were in Paris, participating in the COP21 in December, to the heads of states and leaders. Going green, do it because it's good for health, it's good for the environment, it's good for job creation, and it's good for economy.
Mm-hmm. Pika?
Most of the changes we have faced in the past decades have been influenced by digitalization. We have all the information published in the world in our pockets, and we have a very powerful platform of communication in our pockets. And this is something that changes people's behavior. And one thing it changes is the need for mobility. And as Gregor was saying, you have your own public transport goals. And in Helsinki is a peninsula. We should have a map here. But now fewer than 50% of households living in the inner city area, which is that peninsula, have a car. And mobility is more and more regarded as a service and not a possession. And there are more and more people, especially in the young generation, who regard a private car as a nuisance. It sits there 22 hours in the street. You use it only about 90 minutes to 2 hours a day. And more people are seeing the futility of this idea. And that's a sort of change that we are seeing in many cities the world over. And it's something that it makes life easier if you don't own a car. And this is obviously the way it should be, because you can't, I mean, it's really difficult sort of to sanction the use of a private car. But if it becomes more difficult than treating mobility as a service, we have great opportunities in front of us, both in terms of quality of life and also a big business case. This is something that we are looking at in Helsinki.
There's a bunch of millennials in my family. They all don't want a car, and they are looking at staying within the cities and using transportation, all using car share. So that is definitely a trend that's going to add some advantage to the policies, the hard policies that you're put into place. I'm here in the city partly because it's a tech city, it's a growing tech economy, it's a livable city, but it's a difficult city to afford. So I just want to touch a little bit on affordability. Kind of the elephant in the room sometimes. You create a beautiful green oasis, is it going to become a place where only the wealthy can live in? How can I personally be able to afford to live here and create a family and a career? So how are you balancing that struggle? Anyone? Frank?
Yes, that's a big issue for all mayors in the big cities around the globe to make our city affordable, especially for housing. I was very happy last year when the Danish government gives us a new tool in the municipalities. When we are making a new urban development plan for a brand new area in the city, we can demand that up to 25% of the new housing units shall be affordable housing. And we are now planning, we need 45,000 new housing units in my city before 2027 because we are a growing city. We expect an increase in the number of citizens with 20% before 2027. So we need this tool so the city can be a city for all, also for people with not a high salary. But now we have had a new government in Denmark in June last year, a liberal government, not liberal in a Canadian context, more right-wing, and they want to remove this new legislation for affordable housing. So we are protesting in my city against the new government's plans to rule that new legislation back, because then it will give only the market economy the place for getting new housing units. And I think that will be a wrong way to go, because we can see some big cities in Europe where it's only the markets who are going to give your new housing units. And if it's only the market, you can see that you cannot take the leadership for the city to create a city for all in the real life.
Yeah, it's a very difficult challenge here in Vancouver, and we've been grappling with it for years, but the curve keeps steepening here locally in terms of real estate prices. Buying an actual house in Vancouver is completely out of reach for almost everyone now certainly on an average income. So our focus at the city level is to build rental housing. Over half of Vancouver residents rent their homes. But the city over many decades now wasn't focused on building rental housing. They were building condo apartments for ownership. And we've shifted that formula. We've gone from 5% of our new supply being rental housing to 20% of our new supply. So we're creating more rental housing, which is primarily going to benefit younger people who don't have the dollars to buy into the market yet, particularly as the prices have escalated so dramatically. It's a tough one when like provincial and federal governments have historically had primary responsibility around housing, and particularly building affordable housing, what we call social housing, public housing here. That's been in short supply. We've kept a lot of pressure on since I've been mayor to get more funding, and we're expecting the new government of Canada. They've made much bigger commitments than ever before. We'll see what that is able to leverage. We use public land, city land, to get what we can, partnering with the community, with private sector, to get housing built with a mix of affordability and more expensive units that offset each other. But it's a very difficult problem in Vancouver on a limited land base, when not only do you have people coming across Canada, because we're the warmest city in Canada, we also have people coming from all over the world and investing primarily in the higher end of the market in Vancouver, driving the high end up dramatically. But we have, as a desirable, livable city, we have people coming here to a limited land base, and the appetite for a lot more density, big buildings into neighborhoods is very limited. We have to be very careful with how we densify the city. So it's a collision of all these different challenges. And if we're getting at the opportunity with green jobs, with clean tech jobs that are significantly higher salaries than the average job in the city, that's a bonus. If we can create great new jobs that pay well, that helps on the housing front. People can afford housing more readily. And also creating affordability with transportation is a big, housing and transportation are one piece for affordability. So making transportation, or as Frank says, the district heat, and if we as cities can reduce people's cost burden on transportation or utilities, that's a benefit as well. But it's attacking the problem from all angles. That's all we can do at this point.
And helping people understand that living in a smaller home is just the way of the future. We're all just going to have to deal with it. I'm going to have to deal with that. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, we have pretty much the same problem, and I think the problem is in the end unresolvable. A successful city has a housing shortage. Mm-hmm. Demand is bigger than supply, and the more you build housing, the more people want to move in. It's as simple as that. And if your city starts to go down, there's more and more empty housing. And like in Finland, the Helsinki metropolitan region has 20% of the population of the whole of Finland, but it produces almost 40% of the gross national income. That in itself sort of explains the housing shortage and the price differences in housing in the metropolitan area and elsewhere in Finland. There's plenty of affordable housing in other parts of Finland, so much that municipalities are now demolishing old sort of socially assisted rental housing. And more people are moving to the city after studying, jobs, and all that. So we have to use a multiple set of solutions. Obviously building more homes, but public transportation. It makes it easier to move around between your job and your home. And it matters less where you live if it's easier to move around. And this is something that we're trying to do in Helsinki. Also, we have a long tradition of like mixed occupancy housing areas where you have sort of hard money mortgaged apartments and socially assisted housing in the same area, which in order to prevent segregation within the city. But that's another story.
Well, the city has actually, Vancouver has actually done that quite creatively, if you want to speak to some of our creative housing projects that we have.
Yeah, it's definitely been our approach is to be focused on a mix of housing everywhere and job space as well. We've used up a lot of our industrial land. It's been converted to residential land and in the core of the city. And that's been, as the city grew over the decades, recent decades, local governments chose to convert industrial land that was sitting idle at the time to build residential. And that alleviated some of the pressure around density and neighborhoods being impacted by new building. And some of those are very well-planned neighborhoods. They're a mix of housing, there's social housing, there's job space right there adjacent, if not integrated. But overall, we've whittled down our industrial land to a very small land base. So some of that is maybe appropriate given that the nature of our work is different. The city had heavy industry for most of its earlier history, and now we have much more job density where there is workspace. And we've grown up, obviously, in our downtown with job space. But getting a mix, making sure people can walk to work is a big one. In terms of affordability, it doesn't get any cheaper if you can walk to your place of work and you live adjacent to everything that you need. So we've been doing that as a city for many years now, and I think that's part of why we're considered one of the most livable, because it's a city that's very walkable and there are opportunities to live close to where you work and play and go to school. And that goes back to the original plans of the city from well over 100 years ago. laid out community centers and schools and libraries in walking distance from everywhere in the core city. So that's been a big advantage in terms of the planning, is that original grid spaced out all of those services and the industrial area. But we're always looking to improve that. And with all of the new development, that we have the greenest building code in North America right now. We look at what's happening in Copenhagen, Helsinki, and cities in Northern Europe in particular, to keep advancing our building code, looking at carbon neutral and carbon positive buildings now. That's going to be a key part of affordability going forward as well, because of the life cycle costs are reduced. That's a key piece with all of the housing that we do, making sure that that new technology is part of our green building plan.
And that also adds to an upside to the economy, new industries, new supply chain opportunities, et cetera. So on another topic around climate action and challenges, if we could just spend a few minutes kind of talking about your lessons learned. I hate to say failures, but lessons learned as you've tried to work towards some very aggressive targets over the next 10 to 20 years. What would jump to mind, Frank?
We have learned that our citizens want to be a part of realizing our plan to be a green and livable city, to become carbon neutral. We can see that when it comes to bicycling in Copenhagen, 50% of all the Copenhageners use their bike for daily transport, to job or to study. We have in the city invested heavily in bicycle infrastructure. We have now 350 kilometers of separated bicycle lanes, and the Copenhageners want to use them. They learn their kids when they start in kindergarten to go by bike, and when they start in school, they can go themselves by bike to school. And it make an easier life for the family, and it's healthy. And all kind of people are biking in my city. It's not only for students or poor people. Ministers, mayors, all kind of business people are biking, because it's an easy way to commute in a city. And our lesson is that biking was a part of our culture in the past, and it was nearly got completely away when all people have the possibility to buy a car. But when the city decided to go back to the old biking culture, you can do that. We could do that when we make it safe to go by bike. If you make it safe in the city to go by bike, people want to go by bike. And we are also a very flat city. We are not a hilly city, so it's more easy also to bike in the kind
Always
of city we are running in Copenhagen.
Please.
Maybe I'll share. I mean, a couple of the bigger challenges that we need more help with, particularly from private sector. We need to make our existing homes more energy efficient, and there's been programs around the world in cities to retrofit houses and buildings, make them more energy efficient, and it's a really mixed track record. Not only is it tough to get everybody to convert their homes, it's happened in some places, there's been some successes, but a lot of cities have struggled, and we have struggled. Our electricity costs here are very low, so there's not a lot of direct incentives. We had programs from the BC and federal government that evaporated over time, so there wasn't easy money to help retrofit an older home or building, and so we're behind in that target. We need fresh approaches to that, and technologies that will enable it. If there was a higher price on carbon, that might make a difference, because a lot of homes are heated by natural gas, which is cheap here. So that energy efficiency in homes piece is one that we need to grapple with, because we have a lot of our emissions are coming from our buildings, existing buildings. That's a piece that needs a lot more work. At this point, we have a lot of rain here in the winter, and there's a culture of using lots of water here. So we have had some success reducing our water use, but we need to do a lot more of that. Last summer, we saw the biggest, most significant drought in our history, and we had to go to stage 3 level water restrictions, which has not happened in living memory. Basically, it's not been part of our lives at all, and we need to adopt what many other cities have done around the world in terms of reducing our water use. And a lot of that's individual, but some of it is also in our businesses. So water consumption is one where we need to do better at, as well as with waste. We've had great success bringing in composting, green bins, particularly at a household level. And many cities are having the same problem. In apartment buildings, it's a lot tougher to deal with compost, organic waste. They weren't built with facilities to do that. It's illegal for that organic matter to go to our landfill or incineration. So that is now the law of the land, but we have a lot of larger buildings, apartment buildings that frankly, they're just not able to deal with that at this point. So we have a challenge with that, and we don't have all the solutions delivered. So looking at different partnerships, different technologies, ideas that people have, so that we can ensure everyone who lives in an apartment building has an easy, convenient system to make sure all of their organic matter ends up going to get composted, and rather than getting disposed of. So that's one where there is a gap right now that we need to address, and where we're talking with anyone who's in the business of it. So a couple examples where I don't think we're doing well enough, and we're going to need better partnerships and new approaches to be successful.
Great, thank you.
We actually resolved that in Helsinki. We have a bylaw that every apartment building that has more than 20 apartments has to have a recycling point within the build or in the backyard, practically. And my house has a recycling point with I think 8 or 9 different bins for different kinds of waste, and they all recycled. And 8 of those bins are for recycling, and the last one goes to incineration. So basically, it's a pretty elegant system, and the only weak point is the individual. And especially young single men are the worst recyclers. They just have the one bag that goes into incineration. But this wasn't what I was going to say. I mean, one interesting observation I have over the past 15 years, or maybe this millennium, is political. Because most of the stuff we're talking about was completely marginal not very long ago. And some bits were marginal about 10 years ago. And it was something that only the hippies and Greens were talking about. And now it's mainstream. And the main strategic choices, strategic decisions in the city of Helsinki have been made unanimously in the city council of 85 members and multi-party setup. Obviously, there are 1 or 2 dissenters, in every vote, but basically they've been unanimous decisions. And this would have been unthinkable in the 1990s, absolutely. And I think it's very promising, and it really gives you some grounds for optimism in a situation which seemed very fragmented not very long ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, regarding the green transition, something we've heard a lot about over the last few days, from oil and gas to renewable energy, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how your cities are grappling with that struggle. It's been a unique struggle here in our region and in Canada around the tar sands and other oil and gas initiatives, but we are in a time of transition. How do we balance that with the aggressive targets? So, who would like to start? Please, go ahead.
I'm happy to start. It's a very lively conversation here. We found ourselves a couple years ago in this situation where there's a proposed pipeline from Alberta that wants to bring diluted bitumen for export to China, where it can get refined into fuels. We know that there are enormous climate impacts from that, and having 7 times the number of oil tankers coming through this harbor here around Stanley Park and off basically every day a super tanker right through our inner harbor creates enormous risk for Vancouver's success. We're a green city That is our brand, that's our success, whether it's with tourism or construction and development or our clean tech hub, which is top 10 in the world. That's a very important part of who we are and how we do business. So having the potential for an oil spill in our harbor is a huge threat to our economy. And maybe it generates economic opportunity in Alberta, but it creates real threat here to our economy. But us protesting against that and saying we will fiercely oppose that, going through the public process of pushing back on it was difficult, and we found ourselves in a situation where we need to say, well, we need to offer the alternative, which is part of the genesis of saying we're going to go 100% renewable. If we're not willing to walk our talk and say, well, we want to get our city off of fossil fuels and help other cities around the world to get off fossil fuels, and then we're getting upstream of the problem. It's going to take some time, but you hear timelines in Scandinavia where they're talking about carbon neutral 2020, 2025. I mean, we'd like to get there too. A lot of that will hinge on transportation technology and how quickly zero emission vehicles are available and what the uptake is in the market. That's a huge piece to solve in the near term. And the sooner that the private sector solves some of these challenges, and no doubt that'll be aided and abetted by the Paris Agreement, aided and abetted by city governments saying and doing the renewable piece and saying we're going to push it there with every tool that we have as a city. We're going to drive the pace of change aggressively. I think we're going to see a transformation here, and it should happen a lot quicker. It needs to happen a lot quicker than when we talk about 2050 or beyond. Not that many of us are probably going to be here in 2050 to make sure of it. So I think the more that we can do in the near term, the better. And certainly as cities where we're taking action every day, where people are making decisions in their day-to-day life supported by the city, we think we can make the change happen much more quickly, and then that will have the benefit of reducing our dependency on fossil fuels and the risk to our environment, to our climate from fossil fuels, which I love the line that a solar spill is called a sunny day. That's very different from what happens when fossil fuels spill.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
We have reduced our carbon emissions with 50%, so we have taken all the low-hanging fruits. Now we have to make very tough priorities in our economy to realize our completely carbon neutral position in 2025. So in the coming years, we are going to invest heavily in wind turbines, in wind energy. We are going to invest $1 billion in wind energy in my city. And we are also transforming our power plants to become fueled with biomass, going away from coal to biomass, and that will also cost us heavily in investments to doing that, but we have already reserved the money for it. And we have also introduced district cooling like Helsinki, because a lot of buildings, new buildings in the city, they have want to have a lot of daylight into it. So even in the cold part of Scandinavia, we have to cool down buildings in summertime. Now we have this product called district cooling, where we take the harbor water, take out the cold from the harbor water, distribute the cool in pipes beside our district heating pipes. Even in the old city hall in Copenhagen, we have now district cooling, because it gets very hot in summertime working in city hall. So when you are using district cooling, you can reduce your energy consumption with 70%, going from AC to district cooling. And that's many of these kind of new solutions is very important to realize to be a green city and a carbon neutral in 2025.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. And thanks for mentioning the district cooling, which is now expanding very rapidly in Helsinki. But we figure that the most gains at city level are to be gained from buildings. either new buildings or retrofitting old ones, because, well, estimates differ, but it's about 80% of carbon emissions come from buildings in some form or other, either directly or indirectly. So we're looking very carefully, especially into the new housing and business areas we are building, and the regulations for building permission are the method that the city can use to promote energy efficient buildings. Actually, it's much easier to do that in new buildings than old buildings. Retrofitting old buildings is very difficult because there's not only one method, because there are buildings dating back to different decades or even different centuries that demand completely different approaches to retrofitting them for energy efficiency. But it sounds like we all have pretty much the same sort of ideas here.
Well, I'd like to open it up for discussion to the audience. We've got about 10, 12 minutes left. So I believe there is somebody walking around with microphones, but if you do stand up, I would like you just to state your name, your affiliation, and just a quick, concise question, and we'll try to get to as many people as we can. Oh, looks like there's a blue box being passed around. Okay, good. So people are managing it. Excellent. So somebody will look after you. Please go ahead.
Michael Geller. I'm in Vancouver. I think Vancouver has been inspired by Copenhagen, and we are stealing some good ideas from you. Just look at our cycling lanes. But one thing I have noticed is that both Copenhagen and Helsinki have Uber in place, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering whether or not you would have any advice for Vancouver in terms of whether we should introduce Uber. It is a conversation topic at the moment.
Introduce what? What is that? Introduce what?
Uber.
Ah, the taxi
car sharing,
service.
Uber, specifically Uber. Thanks for the curveball there. Yeah, please.
Yeah, we do have Uber in Helsinki as well, but it's in a legally grey area at the moment, according to Finnish law, and people can use it, but the legal situation is very difficult now, and they're trying to resolve it. And obviously, the traditional taxi profession is doing all it can to sort of make it even more difficult. But it's not easy, but obviously it's coming. I mean, the sharing economy will come. I mean, there's no stopping it. Not only in mobility, but like house sharing and whatever. And we simply have to sort of work out a sort of legal framework for that. A good question.
Got any advice, Frank?
No.
Go ahead.
In BC and Vancouver, we need the approval of the BC government first, and then the city next, and it's been held up at the provincial level. As you know, Michael, there's a lot of citizens that want it, that travel around the world, and they get off a plane here and they can't get Uber. We have very high standards for our taxi industry, accessibility, green cabs. You've probably seen it's all hybrid vehicles with taxis here. We have very high training requirements, safety and background checks, with all that. So those standards don't really exist for Uber generally. So my hope is that we can get a standard across the board where the service is good and reliable, and people are safe, and ideally, I mean, particularly as we see the incoming autonomous vehicles and driverless cars that Apple and Google and Uber are investing enormous sums of money in right now developing. And we're hearing at a city level, 5 to 10 years, we will be dealing with driverless cars in our cities. We're just starting to grapple with the public policy repercussions of that, and wanting to be sure that there are real benefits from this. It could be enormously beneficial in terms of affordability, in terms of safety and less traffic fatalities. if we shift to zero emission driverless vehicles, which is what Google is working on in particular, we're eliminating fossil fuel burning vehicles at a dramatic pace. And we also have a whole bunch of real estate available because there won't be parked cars everywhere if people are using driverless cars and that car service that's immediate. We have a whole bunch of real estate that we can maybe build affordable housing on or use for public spaces. But the impact on the economy, on all the people who drive, will be enormous. It's a massive workforce that will get displaced. And there could be real impacts on the roads. If the roads are just full of driverless cars all of the time, that might not be what we like or want. So we're looking at the public policy implications of all this and want to be shaping that with our eyes wide open to deal with all of the upheaval that it could cause and make sure that we see benefits from it. And so I think what we see right now is, we're in the late stages of having cars that burn fossil fuels and are driven by people and that take an enormous toll on human life and the environment in our cities. So that's all going to change. We want to make sure we're shaping that change for maximum benefit so that it's a win-win situation.
Well, I'm sure driverless cars will be a little bit more easier on cyclists, I hope. There was another question over here. Who's got the box? There you go. Go ahead.
Hi.
You just bring it up to the front.
So I wanted to go back to the conversation you had about intensification because appropriately incorporating density is so fundamental to higher order transportation. And arguably your three cities have done a very successful job of getting mid-rise and sensitive density. What advice do you have for other municipalities hoping to get more civic support for intensification?
Densification.
Well, we've certainly had a wide range of debate around where it happens and how it happens, what it looks like. Vancouver residents are very sensitive to it and I think very well educated about different types of development as they happen. And we've certainly seen a much easier time, I think, historically when, for example, industrial areas were densified with residential. It was kind of the low-hanging fruit for many years to there wouldn't be a local neighborhood that was opposed to seeing towers, for example, on the North Shore of False Creek. A lot of that development happened since Expo 86, and it took out a whole bunch of job space along the waterfront, but there wasn't much pushback for it. Certainly Yaletown is a neighborhood in the south part of downtown. Same thing, it was more industrial and lower income homes, and there wasn't a lot of pushback as many towers were built there. So we don't have those opportunities so much anymore. We don't want to build on our industrial land at this point. So the density has to happen in existing neighborhoods, and a lot of the residents don't want their neighborhoods to change much, if at all. So it's increasingly difficult right now, and I think the cities that are basically full and having to figure out how to add more density are having to be more creative, do a lot more engagement. But we're in the toughest of situations. We're kind of pitting older generation of people who own the homes against the younger generation who can't afford the homes, who want to stay and work in the city, who we need to work in the city. And there's no new places, there's no vacancy in the rental, they can't afford to be in the city. And that's a very, very difficult challenge that we face. I think we're hanging on right now in terms of trying to address it, but it's the top challenge that we face as a city right now, and there are no easy answers for it, but it's almost, we need a higher level dialogue that says if we don't build more, if we're not smart about how we build more, we'll have real problems for the next generation of residents in this city and therefore the future and the economy of our city.
Yeah.
Yes, we are living in a democracy, so we are depending on our citizens and our voters. So we have to have a very close negotiation and dialogue with our citizens to expanding new urban planning areas, and we have the same discussion with our citizens in Copenhagen, also to expanding the city. But it's all about leadership also. You have to lead as a mayor, you have to lead, and you have to follow your plans, and then you have to be elected and not elected again. That's life. That's life. I have been many years in politics now, both in national politics as minister, serving as minister, but now in city policy. And I think that's most important, to be clear. What is your target? What is your plans? And then to take the discussion with your colleagues and with your citizens. That's the way forward.
Yeah. Hard one. Please, Pekka.
The city of Helsinki is pretty much in the same ballpark with Vancouver population-wise. We have now about 628,000 inhabitants, but that's projected to rise to 800,000 by 2050. And we have to build housing for all those people. And 40% of the land area of the city is green areas. And it's a delicate balance in preserving those green areas and housing the more than 150,000 people in the next decades. And obviously, vertical building is more or less the answer. And there's a strong tradition in Helsinki of sort of safeguarding the skyline. It's pretty much like Washington, D.C. I mean, you can't build anything that sort of overshadows the Congress building. We have the cathedral. You can't build anything that overshadows that. But now we have the old cargo port areas that I mentioned before. We are now able to build high-rise buildings, also housing, high-rise housing in those areas. And they not... Some of these areas are a bit off the coastline, so they don't destroy the traditional skyline, or at least that's what we hope. So it's a balance between densification and vertical building and preserving the green areas and housing all the people, new people wanting to live in the city of Helsinki.
Delicate balance. Do we have time for one more question? Yes, I think there was somebody in the front row who had their hand up first. If you wouldn't mind, then we'll take that last question. You'll have to like arm muscle you too.
Okay, I'm Jouni Keronen, Climate Leadership Council Finland. We are representing 28 companies who have solutions for the climate change. So Standard & Poor's just published in January that the world needs like 16.5 trillion investments in dollars by 2030 to cope with the current INDCs. If we go below 2 Celsius, we need to have even more. So do you have targets or estimates how much investments you will have in your 3 cities for the green economy, and what is your best estimate? What is the percentage of the jobs, of all the jobs, to be on the green side by 2030?
Good question. Yeah.
Yep.
Please.
We are going to, as I told you, we are going to invest massively in new concrete solutions if we are going to reach to our target in 2025. Just I told you, in wind turbines, we are going to invest $1 billion in wind turbines. We are going to invest also in retrofitting the city's own buildings, and we are going to invest also in new urban areas where we have decided from the beginning in the North Harbour of Copenhagen. There will, in the future, will live 40,000 people. There will be space for 40,000 jobs. It will be completely carbon neutral from the beginning. So there we give the clean tech industry the possibility also to come up with concrete new solutions, and the city are going to be the customer. And that's what is also all about when we invite the business and industry in the clean tech sector to be a part of our realizing our visions in Copenhagen, is also to innovate in the business and industry to come up with newer, cleaner and greener solutions.
So we've got just in public transit alone our 10-year plan for the region. Once you gross it all up, it ends up being close to $1 billion a year going forward. And that's just for the public transit component with with some investment in active transportation as well, and a little bit in the roads, but that's one example in terms of scale. It's a multiple of that if we look at what it's going to cost with green buildings, with retrofitting, and improving the built environment in the city to deal with 2 or 1.5, getting our emissions down where our targets sit. So they're dramatic. It's billions and billions of dollars a year that we need to be investing in Metro Vancouver to make sure that we're starting to achieve the targets that we've laid out for ourselves. In terms of green jobs, the goal in Vancouver is to double the number of green jobs. Right now, it's close to 5% of our workforce fits in the United Nations definition of green jobs. Clean tech is the fastest growing component of that. But we have enormous job growth with local agriculture right now. The local food industry has been thriving as people want to buy more local food and other people get into the business of it and wanting to supply it. So we're seeing dramatic job growth in that, and we'd like to see that be a much bigger part of our economy going forward. But that means that government policy has to be enabling it, be driving it, and supporting it. So again, it's with regulation, with policy, with procurement, the investment that we do. One interesting program that we're doing, and I know Copenhagen and I'm guessing Helsinki as well have a similar piece. It's called the Green and Digital Demonstration Program, where we open up city procurement to green and digital companies to come in and basically demonstrate their technology at the scale of our city. To be able to prove that, to get endorsement from City of Vancouver, and then be able to market their products or their services to other cities around the world. And what we're finding, the initial uptake was very successful, and we have very deep connections in Asia, and particularly with Chinese cities who are dealing with enormous challenges with pollution, trying to green their cities. And these new technologies and services, I think, will be very important, helping other cities around the world to up their game and to deal with pollution, to green their cities. I think cities like ours have a responsibility to do our best, bring that forward. We get a benefit in terms of economic development, of livability in our cities, and we're able to share and export that technology and create opportunities in other cities.
Okay. PK, you get the final word.
Yeah, there's not much to add. And I'm afraid I don't have any exact answers to your questions about green jobs and green investments, because it's a bit of a matter of definition. But like our public transport schemes, the metro underground extension, 1 billion euros. The extension is going to open in August. 2 more big light rail projects, each 300 million euros. These are huge sums in our neck of the woods. And obviously, most of this stuff is wages for the workers who build this stuff. And one interesting question is the relationship between the national government and the cities. And like the cities, at least in Finland, don't fund research and development as such, but the national government does. And about 2/3 of the research and development budget of the national government goes into green tech stuff.
Well, good. Well, I want to thank you all, and thank you mostly for your dedicated service. It is not easy being green, and it's truly appreciated. So please, carry on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.